Hey guys, what's up? It's Sydney. Welcome back to my channel and to part 2 of commonly used phrases. In this video, I will talk about our commonly used phrases and where they basically come from. We say certain phrases and things every single day and don't know the actual origins or reasons behind why we say them. So in this video, that is exactly what we're going to talk about. So the first one is actually going to be one that is very commonly used, especially in times of disagreements or conflict of interests, is burying the hatchet. Now this term and the way that we use it actually has a very strong connection into what the original meaning of bury the hatchet meant. Now this was actually an American Indian tradition of the chiefs of the tribes. So when two chiefs would basically come to a peace agreement, they would symbolize this by burying a hatchet from each tribe into the ground to symbolize their unity or peace. And this was actually done in a very ceremonial way. And it's very interesting because we use this phrase in the same kind of meaning that they did back then. Burying the hatchet is exactly what that means. It's coming to a peace agreement. It's, you know, agreeing to disagree or whatever you want to call it, and basically moving on with a less hostile environment. The next one we're going to talk about is break a leg. Now we all know what this term means nowadays, but for it back then, how it originated, if you remember somewhat of your history lessons in school, you will recognize the name John Wilkes Booth. And he is actually responsible for this term that we use pretty frequently when it comes to performers going on stage. We want to wish them good luck, so we say break a leg. But John Wilkes Booth, the one who assassinated Lincoln in 1865, is actually responsible for this. So if you remember anything about your history lessons, that this term actually did come from him. So basically what happened is, after the murder, John Wilkes Booth actually leaped to the stage of the Ford's Theater, and in doing so, he actually broke his leg. And this is where we get the phrase from. Now, this next one might cost you an arm and a leg, if you catch my drift. Now, although no one really knows the true origin of where this phrase actually came from, many people believe, and I'm included in these many people, that this phrase actually came from the World War time, because soldiers would come home and return without arms and limbs, and that they said that the war had a very high cost. So people started saying it costs an arm and a leg. And I believe that that's where we got this phrase from. I personally believe that. So if you can find concrete evidence to back me up on that, that'd be cool. If I'm wrong, let me know too, because I don't want to be like misinforming people. But I believe that that's where the phrase come, and it makes a whole lot of fucking sense to me. A lot of our phrases are based on very morbid events and morbid things that have happened in history. So it's kind of weird. Now the next one is actually the walls have ears. And this today actually basically just means like be careful what you say, you never know who could be listening, so on and so forth. But about 430 to about 367 BC, this actually had kind of the opposite meaning. An ancient Greek ruler built his palace and had ear-shaped carved cuts between all of the rooms, so that way he could hear everything that was being said in his palace. And believe it or not, this practice was actually very popular among many rulers of many different cultures around that time period. So kind of strange. Now this next one is paint the town red. Now there's actually two separate meanings or origins behind this phrase, and I kind of want to give you both because they both seemed incredibly interesting to me. Now the first one comes from 1837 from a man named Marquis of Waterford. And he was known as a badass ladies man. Now Marquis got his friends together and started drinking in an English town, Melton Mowbray. Now they were so drunk that they caused so much havoc throughout the entire town, and actually painted statues, toll gates, and doors of random homes red. So this is a very literal definition of what paint the town red means. It's definitely not what it means in our society today. It just means go out and have a good time, maybe get drunk. So maybe it is the same. Now the second one actually comes from the American West, and this was because brothels were incredibly popular and men would actually go out and act as if they were in the red light district. So that actually makes a little bit more sense in the fact that people would go out and party and stuff. So this one is a little bit more close to home for us nowadays. Which, now that I think about it, being in school and doing these videos and taking care of my son and running my business and everything else, I haven't gone out and painted the town red in a very fucking long time. So I think I might do that soon. Now the next phrase is turn a blind eye. And this phrase actually goes all the way back to the early 1800s. Are you seeing a pattern here? Like, a lot of these are like from a long time ago. So we've been saying stuff for hundreds of years and most of us don't really know what it means originally and where it came from. So kind of crazy to think about. Naval hero Nelson is actually responsible for this specific term. Nelson was actually blind out of one of his eyes. Now during battle, his supervisor actually flagged for him to retreat during the battle, but he claimed that he didn't see this because he was blind out of his one eye. So he actually didn't see the signal from his superior. But they ended up being victorious and it was a massive win. So I guess they like kind of concocted a term specifically for him, which is kind of cool. And kind of funny that he just didn't see the signal and then they ended up being victorious. That's kind of weird, but cool. Now this next one, I know that everyone pretty much on this fucking planet has used this one before. And this is heard it through the grapevine. Not great vine, grape with a P, grapevine. I love when people get that wrong. Now this term actually comes from the 1850s. And a lot of the communication was in the form of telegraphs. So this was a straight line of communication between one person and another, with a little bit of twists along the way. Stories did change a bit, but they didn't actually whisper through the grapevine. So they were communicating like normal, but it was a little bit off from what the actual original message was, because it went from one person to another, and sometimes, well, it only takes one to twist the story around. So yeah, that is where we get the term heard it through the grapevine. Now the next phrase is a baker's dozen. Now this term actually comes from the medieval times, so very different time period. But basically bakers would put a extra loaf of bread in with the dozen, so that way they would not be underweighed when they went to go sell product, because they could actually be fined or flogged. And flogged actually means being whipped with a stick or a whip. So they could actually be injured if their bread was underweight. So they would put an extra one in there so that way they wouldn't get a whipping or a fine. And this was a common practice back then. And that's why we call it a baker's dozen. Now this one is kind of gross and makes me a little sick, so if I gag while I speak about it, I apologize. But this one is actually chow down. Now the term chow down actually comes from the World War II times, and this was actually used by the US military, this phrase. And the reason why they started calling food chow is because the Chinese ate dog meat, and they would call it chow because chow was a specific Chinese breed of a dog. So chow became slang for food among soldiers, which is really gross in my opinion. I think it's disgusting, but I'm not a fucking vegetarian or anything, but I don't like the thought of people eating dogs, so there's that. And last but not least, speak of the devil. Now, this is a phrase that we all have used, often I might say, and this phrase actually goes all the way back to the 16th century. This phrase was actually included in a lot of Old English and Latin historical texts. And starting in England, this was actually a very literal phrase for them. They actually believed that if you spoke the name or names of the devil, that he would actually appear. Now, I personally don't really believe in this little theory here, so I don't mind telling you the names of the devil. So the first one would be Old Nick, Prince of Darkness, the Horned One, Devil, and many, many more names. This basically was very, very bad juju for them. So it was definitely something that was never said out loud. And actually the entirety of the phrase is speak of the devil and he will appear. So this is actually where we get the term from, because usually when you're talking about someone and they show up or something, or they call you, you're like, oh, speak of the devil. And that's because they are making their appearance. So that's where we get that from. That is actually all the commonly used phrases that I have for you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching my part 2 of commonly used phrases. If you have any video suggestions that you would like to see me do, go ahead and leave them in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that way you don't miss any more videos that I put out. If you want to go ahead and give me a follow, you can. All of that will be in the outro, and my jewelry shop and YouTube channel is on there too. So go ahead and give me a follow on those, and I will see you guys next Wednesday.